as Carlos mentioned, the title of my talk today is Hanging Together: How Truth Tellers Can Resist Attacks and Defend Reality. And our opening panel touched on some of the issues that are facing our community, this global community of truth tellers. And truly, seeing the chat go by today, I see it as a global community with many different continents represented. So what do I mean by truth tellers? We are a community of researchers, of journalists, of academics, of civil servants, of activists, and even regulators. We might have different job titles, but we all have one thing in common. We care deeply about our shared reality, and we care deeply about protecting it. For about a decade now, that shared reality has been under attack. And as we know all too well, democracy cannot function without a shared reality. So we've all stood up. We have exposed how nation states and politicians and profiteers have all polluted our information environment. We've highlighted the role of the multi-billion-dollar corporations that have hastened and encouraged that pollution. And for that work, we have come under attack. Our community has been under attack. Autocrats and their allies who have relied on disinformation to gain support are strategically attempting to undermine our work. There's a couple of different ways that I've seen how these forces try to attack us, different tools in their toolkit, as it were. And early in my career, I used to work on Russia and Belarus, supporting democratic activists in those countries. And unfortunately, these tactics that were so visible, so common in places like Russia or China or Iran are now being used against those of us in democratic countries as well. And I think we need to call them what they are. They are autocratic attacks. So here are the 4 categories of attacks that I've seen, part of this autocratic toolkit. The first is lawfare. This is a term of art in English, but essentially what this means is strategic litigation, frivolous or politically motivated lawsuits, subpoenas, document requests that are meant to bury disinformation, researchers, academics, civil servants, activists, and make defending reality too expensive for us to keep doing. They also demonize us in the media, in fringe media often, telling their audiences that we belong to the deep state, or that we are CIA plants, or that we are foreign agents, or more commonly these days, that we are attempting to censor them, when all we're doing is exposing more information, giving people more information to make choices in their democracies. These autocrats also use administrative burdens, things like foreign agent filings or attempting to put a little bit more friction into our daily lives, taking away perks. In the United States, we've seen some disinformation activists have their global entry status removed or be under certain investigations. Certainly, this is hanging over all of our heads in the United States right now as well. And the general idea behind this administrative burden is to add friction and unpleasantness to our daily lives and, frankly, act as a warning to others. The Soviet Union did this as well. And the idea was saying, oh, this person here has displeased the regime. And now, if you do the same thing, if you act out in that same way, you can expect the same response from the government. And then, of course, there are threats of violence. All of the other tactics, the demonization in the media, strategic litigation, the administrative burdens, all amount to people being more aware of our work, which on one hand is good, but sometimes it's people who are not supporters, right? And they'll come after us. They threaten us with violence. They contribute to networked harassment. And that might include doxing, the release of our personal information on the internet, or violent threats. And some of these violent threats are not just on the internet, they end up offline as well. I'm personally familiar with these attacks. And they have targeted me for the past 3 years. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my personal story, what's been going on in my life for almost 3.5 years now. As I mentioned, I started my career working on Russia and disinformation from Central and Eastern Europe and targeting Central and Eastern Europe. And after about a decade of doing that, I was asked by the Biden administration to lead a new coordination group within the Department of Homeland Security that they had called the Disinformation Governance Board. This was a very bad name. It made it sound like the board was going to be governing information online, but that really was not the purpose of the board. It was much less scary than it sounded. The board was meant to set policy for how the Department of Homeland Security responded to disinformation affecting the domestic environment, while also protecting freedom of expression and privacy. Essentially, it was a policy working group. And I, as I liked to say, was reaching out to different parts of the department to bring everyone together, to make sure that we all knew what was going on, to set policies and guardrails to protect Americans' civil rights and civil liberties. Unfortunately, the department didn't communicate very transparently about what we were doing. And as a result, we saw an immediate backlash from folks on the fringes of the political spectrum, both on the far right and the far left, who claimed that we were going to be censoring people. Now, this couldn't have been farther from the truth. I had a team of one, that was me. I had no budget, and I didn't have operational authority to tell individual parts of DHS what to do. But as we're all familiar with, the facts don't matter for those who are using disinformation for power and for profit. And I very quickly became the target of a disinformation and online harassment campaign. So I'm going to go through each of those 4 pieces of the toolkit again and tell you how they ended up in practice for me. The first was, of course, the demonization in the media. When my appointment to the Biden administration was announced, Fox News led a charge that included hourly segments about me, lying about my work. They lied about work that I had done on Russia previously. They lied about the work that I was meant to do at the Department of Homeland Security. And they expressed a lot of intrigue and skepticism and just a lot of nastiness about me and my work. Now, don't get me wrong. People can speculate. People can form their opinions about me, but these segments were based on lies, again, claiming that I was going to be censoring my fellow Americans. And I would not have taken the job if that had been the case. My grandfather was deported by the Soviet Union from Poland when he was 10 years old. He was in a gulag for several years. Censorship is anathema to who I am as a person. But that, again, did not matter to those that were lying about me. And when these segments would air, I very quickly started to receive violent threats. I was about 8.5 months pregnant at the time with my first child, and people were commenting on my pregnancy. They were doxing us, so they released our home address, our telephone numbers. We received mail at home, and we received a lot of violent threats to the point that someone who I hired to help me take care of my security at that time, because unfortunately the department was not doing very much, told me that I should leave my house just a couple of weeks before I gave birth to my son. I ended up not doing that because, as you may know, pregnant ladies come with a lot of stuff, and we just couldn't fathom leaving our house, which was close to the hospital, a few weeks before our son was due to make his way into the world. But our security has never really recovered since then. And there would be pretty clear upticks in threats every time that Fox News mentioned me. And again, this went on every hour, on the hour, for weeks on end. They continued to mention me for most weeks in 2022. And eventually I decided to resign. I resigned in May of 2022 after the Biden administration made it clear that they weren't really willing to stand up against these lies, to stand up for me, and to stand up for the work that they had hired me to do. that was the real last straw for me. And we'll talk about how you all can resist some of that in your own organizations in a bit. So that was the demonization and the threats, which continue today. But I also mentioned lawfare and the administrative burdens on our sector. I have been the subject of frivolous lawsuits, including from a stalker who has come after me, who claims that I've censored him. Those suits have been dismissed with prejudice, but they still take time and money to respond to. They really have burdened me from, they've been such a burden that it has distracted in some cases from my work. And at this point, the legal representation that I have had to engage in has cost me almost $100,000. I was lucky to have a crowdfunding campaign that supported most of those costs. But it is a huge burden. And I know not everyone is so lucky to have a platform to be able to raise that sort of money. And I'm very, very grateful for the support that I've received from the community. But in addition to those lawsuits, I was also really slapped with big administrative burdens. I was investigated by the House Judiciary Committee, which sent me a subpoena to appear before them. I was the first disinformation researcher to receive one of those subpoenas, and I had to go do a 5-hour deposition before the House Judiciary Committee with individuals like Representative Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz and some others who believe that disinformation researchers censor conservatives online, which there is no evidence for. And in addition to that, what we've seen recently in the United States is a real a beginning of fear among the funding community, the donor community, not just the US government funding mechanisms, which I'm sure you've all been affected by as well, but even the philanthropic community is less interested in funding work to counter disinformation because they are worried about the threats that have come along with this work. So that's how it's affected my life. It goes on to this day. I am still getting legal bills. And it's something that's happening to other disinformation researchers as well, not just in America, but also in the United Kingdom, the European Union, the Republic of Georgia, in Australia, in Brazil, and in many other countries. This is now a global movement. And the point is, I think, that autocrats have recognized that you need to be able to control the narrative. You need to be able to control the means of communication when you want to seize power. And it is our community, disinformation researchers, journalists, academics, fact checkers, activists, and some civil servants in certain governments as well, who are standing in the way of that. And that's why we're being attacked. Now, this is not all doom and gloom here this morning. I also want to share some of the lessons that I've learned, because I do think our community can learn from them, can grow, and can make sure that when these attacks come for you and your communities, that you are prepared in a way that the Biden administration wasn't, in a way that the American disinformation community was not prepared to deal with these attacks. So there's 3 lessons that I've learned. The first is that no one really stuck up for me when it mattered the most. As I mentioned, I was the first person to really deal with this. I had to basically deal with it on my own. And in part because the Department of Homeland Security was very bad at communicating about this issue. And in part because I think people were quite scared and confused and unsure of what to do. There was a deafening silence to the attacks on me. And what we've learned since then is that the way a community reacts to the first attack against it really matters. We've seen this in the United States with law firms. We've seen it with universities. The attackers understood when they went after me, and there was very little pushback, that the tactics were working. And so they tried it again and again. And I think as a global community, the disinformation research community and those who try to counter disinformation, we've gotten marginally better in our responses and our support for one another. But unfortunately, we have exhibited nowhere near the solidarity of the other side. When the folks who lie for a living, whose power and profit depend on those lies, when something comes after them, they defend each other and they don't give it a second thought. And unfortunately, I have seen that because of competition for funding, because of deep-seated grievances or distrust within our community, that is not our first instinct, and that really needs to change. And so I have really tried over the past 3 years, when possible, to stand up for everybody who is under attack and draw attention to their plight, because that is incredibly important. And I also send messages to people when I know they have been dealing with harassment as a result of their work, because it really, I know from personal experience, means a lot to receive those messages. Secondly, I think we made a key error in that we allowed the other side to exercise reflexive control over our work and the way we describe it. Particularly when we're using English language, we have shied away from the word disinformation over the past couple of years because it has become this politically loaded term. And I was very happy that this summit did not shy away from using that word. We need to make sure that we don't contort ourselves into pretzels trying to rebrand what we do just because it has become politically inconvenient. It really adds to the problem of the public and their understanding of our work, right? If we keep shifting terms every couple of years, it's going to be difficult to communicate with those who might want to support us. Thirdly, I think perhaps the most important thing to note is that strategic silence in this arena really does not work. What do I mean by strategic silence? We are often told by public relations professionals that when we're dealing with a PR crisis, that we should just ride it out. We should just keep silent and wait for it to be over. This is what the folks at DHS told me when we were going through all of this. They said it'll be over in a couple of days. Well, here we are 3.5 years later, and it's not over yet. The strategic silence that we are often counseled to take just does not work in the internet era. As much as you try to not put a foot wrong, sometimes the forces that are so interested in the work that we do, because it is an impediment to them continuing to shore up power and profit, they know that they're still going to come for you someday. And we are seeing this in the United States right now. Those who may be rebranded or who didn't decide to speak out about some of the disinformation that we saw domestically are still being targeted by the Trump administration at the current moment. So those are the 3 key lessons. And now you're probably wondering why I called this talk Hanging Together. There's a famous quote attributed to Benjamin Franklin during the writing of the Declaration of Independence, I believe, and perhaps the Constitutional Convention, where Benjamin Franklin said to Thomas Jefferson, "If we don't hang together, then we most assuredly will hang separately." And I think this is an important thing for us to remember as our community is under attack. It's been true for a couple of years, and certainly as we faced increased attacks over the past 9 months, it continues to be true that we need to really express a lot of solidarity and cooperation with one another. So a couple of key things that I think we can really focus on as we go forward to trying to support one another and continue to fight for that shared reality that is so important in our democracy. The first thing is that we should have a big tent. That means that we include everyone, that we do not gatekeep our community, that those who are new and those who have been in it for 10 years or even more, those who are from the global south, those who are from the global north, those who are from academic institutions, journalistic institutions, that we should all be coming together to work on this problem together, to share stories, best practices, and to support one another. And that's why I like this event, because it's bringing together folks from journalism, folks from NGOs, academia, and different parts of the world, this truly global audience, to educate and to connect. And I think that's incredibly important. So let's carry that on going forward. try to coordinate as much as we can. So let's not duplicate effort. It is difficult. It takes more time to do this sort of stuff, right? But if we're coordinating, if we're making people aware of the attacks that are happening, that means that we can be more prepared for them when they come to us, and we can support one another. I think we need to leave those years of competition for funding, et cetera, behind. We also need to communicate with our audiences and the publics in our countries proactively and transparently. This was a mistake that the Biden administration made when naming the Disinformation Governance Board and when communicating about that. And even though I had cautioned them to do otherwise, they chose the path that they chose. And I think in communicating in an untransparent way, and just hoping that people would not take too much interest in the work that we were doing, we doomed the effort that they had hired me to oversee. So I think as much as you can, share open data, communicate transparently, create partnerships with media organizations. So you have a line that is outside of your social media to the public, et cetera. That's incredibly important as well. More tips. Speaking up when you and others are targeted is so important. I mentioned before reaching out to people who are being targeted, but also when you yourself are targeted, I know it can be incredibly scary. I've been there, but if you don't speak up for yourself, your organization, frankly, it's going to be taken as a sign that it is okay, that these battles are worth fighting for the other side. So we have to make it harder for them. The only way they win is if we count ourselves out of the fight. So please do stand up and fight and retain that ground. Hold on to it, and we'll support you in doing that. And then finally, this is perhaps one that is a little bit controversial, but I think it's important that we start to strategically use the courts where it is prudent as well. You might know that I recently sued Fox News for defamation related to their lies about me. Unfortunately, I found out at the end of last week that my case was not successful. That being said, I do not regret taking that action. We need to take a stand when we are targeted and stand up to those who are powerful and say, you're making money off of lies about me, about my organization, about my colleagues, and this is not okay. And as a result of your lies, you are endangering me and my colleagues and my family. My life will never be the same. And I may not get justice in court, but I'm proud that I stood up, and I'm proud that I said, you don't get to do this without making it a little bit more difficult for yourself, right? And I hope that they'll think twice in the future about the way that they defame individual people. So I'm proud of that suit. I'm proud that my team stood up, and it's not the outcome that we hoped for. But again, I wouldn't have done it any differently. And certainly the other side is using litigation to get what they want. And I think our community needs to think about how to strategically litigate and how to fund that as well. That's been a lot of information to chew on. I'm going to leave you today with the idea, not of this just Ben Franklin, we need to be together to hang together or else we'll hang separately, but also the idea that we are not going to win every battle, but we at least need to put up a fight, because our shared reality is too important to let the bad guys take away from us. We need truth to achieve justice, to achieve equality, to achieve peace. And that's why the work that you all do is so, so important. I'm proud to be with you today, and I'm really looking forward to your questions. And again, sorry for the background noise. I hope you could hear me okay. Thank you very much.